In 1837, the renowned socialist leader Fourier, like Saint-Simon, who died in 1825, also passed away in poverty. The renowned revolutionary born passed away, ending his living in exile in Paris. The early French communist Blanqui established the Society of the Seasons. The United States experienced its first economic depression, the Panic of 1837, due to excessive issuance of currency and radical monetary reforms, leading to the collapse of over 90% of businesses and a halving of government revenue. The legendary President Andrew Jackson left office in disgrace. The American economy did not recover until the discovery of the gold mine in San Francisco in 1848. Meanwhile, the second-year student Marx at the University of Berlin was observing the battle between the historical schools Savigny and the Hegelian schools Gans, which made him realize the importance of legal philosophy and that law is not sacred. With the development of economy and society, the contradiction between Hegel's progressive dialectics and his backward political thoughts intensified, leading to a split in the school. The young Hegelians, advocating freedom, revolution, and dialectics, pursued a better and freer world. Hegelian philosophy had a natural tendency towards socialism, while Gans was a representative of socialists. In the summer of 1837, the 19-year-old Marx integrated into the Hegelian Doctor Club. The struggle aim of the young Hegelians was initially Christianity and later the Prussian state. In 1835, Strauss's biography of Jesus stirred up a storm, arguing that the stories of Christianity were unreliable and mythical, originating from the prophecies of the Messiah and being a collective creation of the Jewish nation. This was an extension of the objective part of Hegelian philosophy, but it neglected subjectivity and was criticized by Bauer. Strauss never engaged in politics. 4 years later, 19-year-old Engles was led to atheism and Hegelianism through biography of Jesus. In 1838, Kautsky's work emphasized practice and action, considering the basic task of philosophy to determine the future, viewing socialism as the future. However, his view of practice was still idealistic and focused on criticism. The Halley Annals, edited by Rouge, gathered the active young Hegelians. Rouge admired born revolutionary spirit and had been imprisoned for 4 years for participating in a student association. After his release, he became a philosophy lecturer at the University of Halle for 2 years, which gave him hope for the Prussian state. In 1837, the Archbishop of Cologne was deposed and imprisoned by the Prussian government, prompting Rouge to write articles opposing religion and supporting Prussia. He claimed that his magazine was loyal to Hegelian Christianity and Prussia, but the increasingly reactionary Prussian government did not accept his goodwill. The Minister of Education and Culture, Altenstein, who had always protected Hegelianism, no longer daring to publicly support Hegelianism, hesitated to appoint Rouge as a professor, pushing Rouge towards an oppositional stance. In May 1838, Marx's father passed away, and he shifted his focus from law to philosophy. In the summer semester of 1838, Marx took compulsory courses such as Gabler's Logic, Gans' Prussian Law, and Ritter's General Geography. Ritter was one of the founders of modern geography and human geography, emphasizing the influence of nature on human history. He was said to be the proposer of the Silk Road theory. That summer, Engles, who had been arranged by his family to drop out of school and engage in business, arrived in Bremen. In 1839, Rouge began directly criticizing the Prussian government, accusing it of betraying its historical mission by not continuing to promote religious reform and constitutionalism and becoming reactionary under the influence of Romanticism. The young Hegelians turned to political activities. In 1838, the Doctoral Club still did not allow members to express political views, but they joined Rouge's fight at this time. They agreed with Heinz's view that modern German philosophy, like the French Revolution, was a profound national revolution that could eliminate reactionary elements within the Prussian state through criticism, and bring it back to revolution, completing the liberation cause initiated by the Enlightenment and the French Revolution. In 1839, Engles passed away, and Marx basically severed ties with the University of Berlin, mainly engaging in activities at the Doctor Club. At this time, Marx played a significant role among the young Hegelians. The 30-year-old Bauer considered the 21-year-old Marx to be his most capable comrade. Marx's good friend Koppen even believed that some of Bauer's thoughts were attributed to Marx, being the source and leader of thought. Koppen was the first to provide an objective historical evaluation of the period of the Reign of Terror during the French Revolution and was the earliest scholars in Germany to study Mahayana Buddhism. At this time, Marx had not yet turned to political criticism and, like Bauer, focused on criticizing religion and Hegelian philosophy, closely collaborating with Bauer. However, unlike Bauer, who gradually leaned towards Fichte and developed the subjective part of Hegelianism, Marx developed Hegel's dialectics and objective part, agreeing with the dialectical part of Aristotle's philosophy. That is, the development of ideas requires the spirit to constantly gain new elements from concrete reality. Since the summer of 1839, Marx's research focus has been on the philosophy of self-consciousness in late Greek philosophy, namely Epicureanism, Stoicism, and skepticism. Epicureanism is personal philosophy, healing philosophy, and philosophy of happiness, believing that the highest purpose of life and philosophy is the tranquility and happiness of the soul, opposing feudal superstitions with materialism. Stoicism regards virtue derived from correct understanding as the purpose of life, with a few people able to live a life of inner independence through wise moderation and habits. Skepticism attempts to free people from doubtful knowledge and illusions, focusing on the realm of thought to achieve spiritual tranquility. Marx believed that these philosophies were the keys to opening the door to Greek philosophy and chose them as the topic of his doctoral thesis. Bauer developed his philosophy of self-consciousness based on these philosophies. Marx, Bauer, and Koppen all valued late Greek philosophy because of their historical revolutionary role, criticizing slavery under Roman tyranny, defending the human spirit and freedom, with the skeptics and Epicureans criticizing religion, and the Stoics having republican views, brewing the early revolutionary and combative Christianity. These philosophies were all reclusive, while their core was social criticism and the pursuit of freedom, which was similar to the background of Taoist philosophy during the turbulent period of transition from feudal vassal states to feudal empire in almost contemporary China. Stoicism was similar to Laozi, and Epicurean philosophy was similar to Zhuangzi philosophy at the same time. In this context, in 1839, Marx recorded 7 volumes of Epicurean notes, and later chose Epicurus as the theme of his doctoral thesis. Epicurus' view of social contracts, the obsolescence and evolution of law in his legal philosophy, touched him. Epicurus' materialistic view of the soul and his systemic view of emergence were advanced, atheistic, and scientific, undoubtedly exciting and influencing Marx for life. Epicurus wrote that the soul is composed of particles and only exists due to accidental mixing and will die. The whole object, in general, acquires a special, not simply a combination of characteristics, inherent essence from all these characteristics. Epicurus firmly eliminated religious superstitions with a scientific view of nature. In his doctoral thesis, Marx wrote that Epicurus was the greatest thinker of the Greek Enlightenment. Marx quoted Prometheus' confession, "In short, I hate all gods, and believed that no gods should be placed alongside human self-consciousness. In 1842, Bauer continued to criticize the history of the Gospel of John, writing that in late ancient Greece and the Roman world, these philosophies began to spread, rooted in distress consciousness, the contradiction between the freedom of self-consciousness and the unfreedom of the physical body in the face of Roman tyranny. The purpose of these philosophies was to liberate individuals living in hardship and tyranny, allowing them to transcend all external things, seek inwardly, and find happiness in spiritual tranquility. Bauer called Philo the true father of Christianity and Seneca the uncle. As Engles wrote, Bauer's main achievement was proving that Christianity was not imposed on the Greek and Roman from the outside by the Jews, but was the most genuine product of this world. Like Strauss, Bauer believed that Christianity was a product of historical development, but he emphasized the subjective creation and deception of individuals, that is, the product of self-consciousness. Engels summarized the debate between Strauss and Bauer as the internal contradiction of Hegelian philosophy, whether the determining force of history is substance or self-consciousness, whether it is objective or subjective. By the end of 1839 or early 1840, Bauer had turned to atheism, writing articles denying the absolute truth of the New Testament and the Old Testament. He referred to Lessing's view that the progress of the New Testament compared to the Old Testament showed their temporal limitations, and were different stages of human rationality, thus being fiercely attacked by the Orthodox. The Minister of Education and Culture, Altenstein, in order to protect him, sent him to the Faculty of Theology at the University of Bonn as a lecturer, promising him a promotion to professor soon. Bauer summoned his close comrade Marx, urging him to finish his studies as soon as possible and go to the University of Bonn to seek a teaching position, with the two of them co-editing a radical magazine to fight. Marx then began preparing his doctoral thesis. After 1840, he wrote 8 volumes of Berlin Notes, studying the works of Aristotle, Spinoza, Leibniz, Hume, and Kant. At Bauer's request, Marx wrote a book criticizing the theology professor Hermes in Bonn, who tried to reconcile nationalism and Catholicism, but was declared a heretic by the Pope in 1835. This book was not published due to the reactionary atmosphere. Bauer said that Christianity once played a liberating role, but had become outdated and a constraint. The current most important task was to criticize Christianity and the state mixed with Christian beliefs. The conversion to religion was just lingering in the beauty and fragrance of flowers on the chain, without realizing the cruel bondage of the chains under those flowers. Marx had once used this metaphor. He completely denied any historical form having the qualification to be considered the ultimate realization of universal self-consciousness, eliminating the conservative and reactionary factors in Hegelian philosophy and moving towards complete atheism. However, due to his excessive emphasis on the value of spiritual activities, he returned to fixed subjective idealism, regarding religious consciousness as the alienation of individual self-consciousness. Liberation was just an action within the individual's self-consciousness, that is, personal speculative philosophy. The most cutting-edge intellectuals represented the absolute consciousness of humanity, while the masses were ignorant, irrational, backward, and hindering progress. So he later moved to the opposite side of the mass movement rather than promoting historical progress and the liberation of the whole society. In 1839, Feuerbach published towards a critique of Hegel's philosophy in the Halle Annals, arguing that idealism spiritualized perceptual things and led philosophy into a dead end. The principle of the world should return from spirit to nature, with ideas being determined by concrete reality rather than the other way around. He realized the essential connection between religion and idealism, and saw that without denying idealism and Hegelian philosophy, religion could not be denied. He pointed out that the fundamental problem of religion and the basic problem of philosophy, the relationship between thinking and existence, spirit and matter, were closely related. Feuerbach began his path of materialism, directly criticizing Hegel. Previously, Feuerbach lost the opportunity to become a professor in Germany due to his anonymous pamphlet, denying the immortality of the individual in 1830. He then lived in the countryside and published articles in Rouge's magazine. By the end of 1839, the 19-year-old Engles, influenced by Strauss, began to support young Hegelians. Also in 1839, Bauer wrote to Marx saying that Prussia seemed destined to go through a spiritual Jena campaign. In 1839, the early communist Blanquist Society of the Seasons staged an uprising in Paris. After the failure of the uprising, German exiles rebuilt or restored the League of the Just, an international workers' organization and the predecessor of the Communist League, in London, France, Switzerland, and Germany. In 1839, Oenide Bray published his representative work, The Unjust Phenomena and Their Elimination. In 1840, the later hailed as the father of anarchism Proudhon published his famous work, What is Property? Wright's Property is Theft. In the following 20 years, Proudhon gradually became the leader of Parisian workers, controlling the French branch of the early International Workingmen's Association. From 1839 to 1845, the 70-year-old Owen conducted his last experiment in organizing labor communes. While Marx and the young Hegelians were fighting against religion in newspapers, a new era of communism was dawning. In June 1840, the elderly King William II of Prussia died, and liberals were elated, placing high hopes on the young successor, William IV. Bauer wrote, "Paralyzed hope is reignited, and science will tirelessly defend the concept of the state against the encroachment of the church. Sometimes the state may be mistaken and treat science with suspicion, even resorting to coercion, but reason is inherent in the state, so the state's mistakes will not last long." However, the ignited hope quickly fizzled out. William IV often disguised himself as a liberal, criticizing the bureaucracy due to his capricious and disorderly character, but he was inherently conservative and reactionary, dreaming of restoring medieval institutions. In September 1840, the king rejected the request of the East Prussian Parliament to promulgate the constitution promised in 1815 and convene a national assembly. The Königsberg Dr. Jacobi wrote an article to attack, and the East Prussian governor von Schen was anonymously written, "The people need a class parliament, and the patriarchal rule that treats the people as children to arbitrarily control is outdated." The political opposition first appeared and in the capital of East Prussia, because in the center of trade with the northern states of Königsberg, a powerful bourgeoisie developed. However, the reactionary king was harsh, imposing treason charges on Jacobi and dismissing Governor Schen. In his letter to Schen, he wrote, "Patriarchal rule is the German way of rule, and my right to rule is my hereditary property." The king tightened policies, issuing a new press censorship order that restricted freedom of speech and academic freedom. The relatively enlightened Minister of Education and Culture, Altenstein, also died around the same time, and the reactionary historical school's Eichhorn replaced him. Eichhorn began to expel Hegelians from universities step by step. Another giant of the historical school, Gans' old rival, Marx law teacher Savigny, became the Minister of Justice. The reactionary Julius Stahl was appointed as Gans' successor. The elderly Schelling was hired by the University of Berlin to criticize Hegelianism. The young Hegelians suffered a heavy blow. Strauss was appointed as a theology professor at the University of Zurich in 1839, but was soon dismissed. Students at the University of Halle were reprimanded for requesting the king to appoint Strauss as a teacher. The professor Fallersleben in Breslau was persecuted for his poetry. Marx's friend Rutenberg was dismissed for writing for liberal newspapers. The young Hegelians turned to more resolute political criticism. Even Strauss, who was politically cautious, revoked his concessions and re-denied the existence of Jesus as a real person. However, they did not aim to completely destroy the existing system or have specific goals, just hoping to promote the development of the times through continuous criticism. In Berlin, a city of kings, bureaucrats, and soldiers, intellectuals lacked strong bourgeois support and were politically backward compared to Cologne, even less than Leipzig and Königsberg. In 1839, Egypt achieved a great military victory over the Ottoman Empire, and the future German chief of staff, Moltke, was serving as a military advisor to the Ottomans at this time. In July 1840, the UK, Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Turkey concluded the Treaty on the Settlement of the Eastern Question without France, which supported Egypt. France was unwilling to confront the major powers alone, and the British and Austrian navies attacked the Egyptian army, defeating Muhammad Ali. From then on, Egypt's modernization process was interrupted and gradually became semi-colonized. Almost at the same time, in June 1840, the British Army attacked China, initiating the First Opium War, which began China's humiliating and cruel modern history of semi-colonization. Previously, from 1830 to 1839, China imported 340,000 chests of opium, with the British East India Company as the main supplier and the British Trading Company Jardine Matheson as the main trader.
The erosion of opium on the people and economy made the corrupt Qing dynasty also intolerant. In December 1838, the Qing court issued the imperial edict for strictly prohibiting opium smoking, and in June 1839, Lin Zexu presided over the burning of opium at Human. The British Whig government advocated for war. On September 30th, 39 companies and manufacturers in the British textile city of Manchester jointly wrote to the British Foreign Secretary Palmerston, claiming Thatcher's ban on opium was an aggressive act against Britain. On January 16, 1840, Queen Victoria delivered a famous speech in Parliament, stating that events in China had caused a disruption in trade relations between her subjects and that country, which she paid great attention to as it affected the interests of her subjects and the dignity of the royal family. According to British law, the decision to start a war rested with the House of Commons.
On April 7, the House of Commons passed a proposal to send an expeditionary force to China and take military retaliation, with 271 votes in favor and 262 against. The Egyptian issue created a strong anti-Prussian sentiment in France. The Prime Minister of the July monarchy, Adolphe Thiers, claimed that the Upper and Middle Rhine regions should be France's natural eastern border. Members of the German Confederation were worried that France planned to annex the left bank of the Rhine, with nationalist emotions on both sides escalating and preparing for war. The French King Philip removed the hawkish Thiers, avoiding armed conflict. The internal cause of the hawkish and nationalist sentiment was the ambition of the emerging German bourgeoisie, with most German liberals participating in the anti-French nationalist movement. The young Hegelians, who were friendly to France, insisted on opposing the reactionary Prussian government and refused to participate in anti-French propaganda. Rouge portrayed the conflict between freedom and reaction as one between constitutionalism and absolutism, with Prussia caught between reactionary powers Russia and Austria and liberal ones Britain and France, poised to tip the balance for European liberalism's future. Rouge's friend Robert Prutz wrote poems calling for freedom for Germany, while in a letter to the king, Interior Minister von Mer criticized these poems, saying that the patriotism it advocated would undermine morale, with the people stating they would resist France if given freedom, which was interpreted as anarchy. Under the influence of Fourier and Babeuf, the utopian socialist Hess had moved closer to the young Hegelians since 1837. In the context of the Franco-German conflict in 1841, he advocated for a progressive liberal alliance between Britain, France, and Germany, transitioning from Hegelian philosophy to an action-oriented one, calling for new revolution. He believed that England's economic tensions were the most acute, and its combination of German intellectualism, French activism would be key to the human liberation project. However, the young Hegelians criticized Hess' action philosophy, accusing him of imitating Spinoza, overly linking spiritual activity to reality, and failing to grasp the unlimited potential of the spirit. This revealed the influence of both idealism and Bauer. The group remained predominantly theoretical, with increasing political undertones, but their socialist ideas were rooted in Germany's backwardness, lacking a strong proletariat and intellectuals detached from it, unable to grasp the class revolutionary potential. During this time, the young Hegelians had distanced themselves from Prussian state ideology, no longer regarding it as the embodiment of the absolute. Feuerbach's humanism began to gain popularity, along with his 1841 work The Essence of Christianity, which studied religion from a humanist perspective, arguing that it reflects humans' image and creating God. The alienation of the individual from themselves and society, expressed through the concept of God, led to a distorted sense of self, where the highest attributes of humanity were attributed to the divine. This resulted in a reversal of subject-object, with the true subject becoming an object of the created God, while the divine became the source of all creation. Feuerbach's work gave a materialistic interpretation to Hegel's concept of alienation, which was later developed by Marx and Engles. In 1847, Engles wrote in Feuerbach and the End of Classical German Philosophy that Feuerbach's book restored materialism's rightful place. The religious mystique was exposed, and only those who had experienced it could fully appreciate its liberating force. We became Feuerbachians soon. In 1841, having recently embraced Hegelian philosophy, Engels published his first major political essay, Erst Moritz Arndt, where he wrote that the era's figures were merging the ideas of Hegel and Berne, with Berne as the doer and Hegel as the thinker. At 21, Engels still carried elements of German nationalism, although mostly patriotism and liberalism in it. He concerned about Germans' fierce anti-French sentiment, arguing that it benefited Russia and Britain, ultimately threatening Germany. The true enemies was Britain's balance of power and Russia's reactionary, not France or its movements, though he was discontented the French desire for control over the left bank of Rhine. To him, reclaiming the German-speaking left bank of the Rhine was a matter of national honor, and Germanizing the Dutch and Belgian territories was politically necessary. However, Engels recognized the importance of granting the people the freedom they had in larger states, particularly to Alsace, and expressed the need for a future where German unity would be a prerequisite for true liberty. In February 1841, the elderly Schelling was invited to Berlin to critique Hegelian philosophy, and Rouge wrote to a friend that Schelling was ignorant of new ideas and a shameless ghost, an open traitor to all philosophy. In the same month, Engels wrote to his friend Grieb, noting that the popular North German journal, the Harz Annals, was so influential that the Prussian king could not ban it without risking massive opposition. The impending collaboration between Bauer and Marx on a radical journal alarmed Rouge, as he worried about the future of his magazine. In May, Under pressure, the Hegelians was ordered to move to Leipzig under Prussian censorship or face closure. Ruge moved to Dresden, renamed his magazine The German Annals, and became more radical, prompting Marx and Bauer, who had previously criticized the magazine's moderation, to submit to it, and abandon their plan to set a new radical magazine by themselves. By April, Marx completed his doctoral thesis, and as his thinking matured, he began to diverge from Bauer and the young Hegelians in line with the historical progression.